The night shift security guard thought he was alone until the elevator opened on the 14th floor and someone stepped out. The problem was that floor had been sealed for nearly 8 years. And according to the building records, nobody was supposed to be there. Most people think night shifts are quiet, boring. The people who actually work through the night often describe something different. Empty hospitals that suddenly feel occupied. Hallways where footsteps echo behind them. Security cameras capturing figures that disappear seconds later. And sometimes, things that simply cannot be explained. Tonight, we're looking at some of the creepiest things ever seen during night shifts. And by the end of this video, you may never feel comfortable in an empty building again. The first incident happened in northern England in 2019. A security guard named Martin worked overnight inside an abandoned office complex waiting to be demolished. The building had been empty for years after the company suddenly shut down. Martin's job was simple: monitor cameras, walk the floors, make sure nobody entered the property after dark. For weeks, nothing unusual happened, until one motion sensor on the 4th floor started activating every single night at exactly 3:13 a.m., always at the same time. At first, Martin blamed faulty wiring, but eventually curiosity got the better of him. One night, he took the elevator upstairs with a flashlight and radio. The hallway was silent. Dust covered the floor. But halfway down the corridor, Martin stopped. There were footprints ahead of him, bare footprints. Ahead of him, bare footprints. Fresh. And they weren't leading away. They were leading toward him, as if someone had been standing at the far end of the hallway moments earlier, watching him. Then his radio burst into static. A voice whispered through it. "Don't turn around." Martin froze. The voice sounded distorted, almost wet. But after a few seconds, he slowly turned anyway. And at the far end of the corridor, beneath the glowing exit sign, stood a tall figure completely covered in shadow. No face, no movement, just standing there. Martin ran for the elevator immediately. Later that morning, security reviewed the CCTV footage. The hallway appeared completely empty. No figure, no footprints, nothing. Except Martin standing perfectly still in the middle of the corridor, staring at something the cameras couldn't see. After that night, he refused to work alone again. But what happened next was even stranger. 3 weeks later, another guard reported hearing knocking sounds coming from inside a sealed maintenance room on that same floor, a room that had been locked for years. The second story takes place inside a hospital in Glasgow. Hospitals at night already feel unsettling. The dim lighting, the endless corridors, the distant sound of machines echoing through empty halls. But according to staff, one section of this hospital felt wrong after midnight, especially the basement level. A nurse named Claire worked overnight shifts there for almost 4 years. And she claimed there was one room nobody liked entering alone. Storage room B12. Staff often reported whispers near the room, cold air, sometimes even crying sounds late at night. Claire ignored the stories for months, until one stormy night when the power briefly went out around 2:40 a.m. Emergency lights flickered on across the hospital. Claire was asked to collect supplies from B12. As she walked downstairs, she immediately noticed the basement doors slowly swinging open by themselves, as if someone had just passed through. The hallway ahead was dark and unusually quiet. Then she heard footsteps behind her, slow, dragging footsteps. Claire turned around instantly. Nobody. But every time she started walking again, the footsteps returned, perfectly matching her pace. That's when things became disturbing. When Claire reached storage room B12, the door was already open. Inside, boxes were scattered across the floor, and standing silently in the corner was a little girl. At least, that's what Claire thought at first. Small figure, long dark hair covering her face. Claire carefully stepped closer. Then the girl slowly lifted her head. Claire later admitted the face didn't look human. The eyes appeared completely black. No pupils, no whites, just darkness. Suddenly, the emergency lights shut off. For 2 seconds, the room went completely black. When the lights returned, the corner was empty. The corner was empty. The girl was gone. But taped to one of the shelves nearby was an old patient wristband from 1987. The name belonged to a child who had died in that hospital decades earlier. Claire resigned 2 months later, and she never spoke publicly about the incident again. But the next story may be the most disturbing of all, because this one was partially captured on camera. In 2022, hotel staff in London began receiving complaints about strange activity on the 11th floor. Guests reported whispering outside their rooms late at night, doors opening by themselves, footsteps in empty hallways. And nearly every complaint involved one particular room, room 1107. Guests rarely stayed there longer than one night. Some refused to sleep inside at all. Eventually, management asked a night auditor named Daniel to investigate. At around 3 a.m., Daniel took a handheld camera and entered the 11th floor hallway. At first, everything looked normal, quiet, empty. But near room 1107, Daniel noticed something strange. A wet trail stretched across the carpet, leading directly to the room, except there were no leaks nearby. Then he heard breathing behind him. Heavy breathing. Behind him. Heavy breathing. Close enough to feel. Daniel spun around. Nobody there. The hallway was empty, but his camera microphone clearly captured the sound. Then, room 1107 slowly creaked open by itself. Daniel hesitated before stepping inside. The room looked empty, beds untouched, bathroom dry. No sign anyone had entered recently, but the television was on. Static filled the screen, and reflected faintly in the dark TV glass was a figure standing directly behind him. Daniel turned instantly. Nothing. Nothing. But the reflection remained. Tall, motionless, watching him. That was enough. Daniel backed out of the room and hurried toward the elevator. But before the doors closed, he looked down the hallway one last time. And standing outside room 1107 was a tall figure with its head tilted unnaturally to one side, completely still. Daniel quit the next morning, and 6 weeks later, room 1107 was permanently closed. Officially, the hotel blamed maintenance problems, but employees claimed guests still reported noises coming from inside the sealed room late at night. By now, you've probably noticed something strange. Different cities, different buildings, different people, yet the experiences sound disturbingly similar. The same late-night hours, the same feeling of being watched, the same empty spaces where something suddenly feels wrong. But one final story might explain why so many night workers refuse to discuss what they've seen. In 2021, a cleaner working overnight in an underground train station in Manchester noticed a man sitting alone at the far end of platform 3 shortly after 2:30 a.m. Most of the station lights had already been turned off. Only dim maintenance lights remained. At first, she assumed the man was homeless or intoxicated, so she approached carefully. But the closer she got, the stranger he looked. His clothes appeared old-fashioned, and his skin looked unnaturally pale beneath the flickering lights. Then the man slowly stood up and stepped directly onto the train tracks. The cleaner shouted at him to stop, but instead of climbing back up, the man calmly walked into the darkness of the tunnel and vanished. No footsteps, no sound, nothing. Security searched the tracks for nearly an hour. Nobody was found. But later, station records revealed something disturbing. Decades earlier, a man matching that exact description had died in the same tunnel after falling onto the tracks late at night. Same clothing, same appearance, even the same location on platform 3. After learning that, the cleaner never returned to work again. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all these stories. Not the shadows, not the whispers, not even the figures seen standing in empty hallways. It's the fact that so many people who work night shifts experience things they cannot explain and eventually choose silence instead. Because after enough nights alone in empty buildings, people begin to realize something disturbing. The world after midnight doesn't feel empty. The world after midnight doesn't feel empty. It feels hidden. And sometimes, whatever hides there notices when you're alone.